And we're back at it. Let's do some normative and non-normative behavior. So what is normal? Exploring folkways, mores, and taboos. Alright, so I don't know how far we're going to get into this document right now, but I plan to get pretty close to finishing it today. So we're going to get pretty fucking far. So, let's get into it. Psychologists and sociologists study human behavior and often ask what is normal? Who decides what behavior is normal? What behavior is strange? And what behavior is criminal? These individuals are studying norms. Norms are standards for what behaviors set by a group of individuals are accepted and which are not. Rules that dictate how a person should be around in a certain group or people. And they're defined by that group and are usually guided by a certain moral standard or ethical value. That is easily understood and internalized by all members of the group. Provide structure and standardize of how people can behave. So norms are just standard ways of living based on the group's ideas of what's accepted and what's not. So norms vary depending on context, physical location, culture by country, and they can change with time as individual attitudes shift or circumstances change to allow certain types of behaviors to be valued. So example, at a baseball game you stand up and yell very loudly when your team gets a home run. At a meeting at work, you do the same thing, but it's considered unacceptable. That makes sense. And here's just other examples. So, norms are just standard ways of living that are agreed upon in certain situations. So, norms are reinforced by sanctions, which sanctions are rewards/punishments for behaviors. Okay? In according with norms, respectively. So, we think about it, sanctions are reward or punishments. Positive sanction is a reward for conforming to normal behavior. Negative sanction is a punishment, so like prison time. A formal sanction is awfully recognized and enforced. Informal is ways of living, I would say. Okay. Formal norms are written down. Informal are just understood and have no specific punishments. So formal norms would be like laws. Informal norms would be like ideas that you don't date your cousin. Okay. So norms can be classified in four groups: folkways, mores, laws, and taboos, which dictate how important a norm is and the consequences for deviating. So, a folkway. Folkways is the mildest type of norm. It's just a common rule or manner we're supposed to follow on a day-to-day basis. So traditions involved have followed a long time. For example, opening a door, helping a person who dropped an item, or saying thank you. So think folkway is everyday interaction of a behavior that's generally seen. So mores, example, friend's pants zipper is undone. Tell your friend his zipper's undone. It's common courtesy. So folkways are common courtesies. Mores are norms based on moral value and beliefs, depends on a group value of what's right and wrong. Generally produces strong feelings. Use a strong reaction if more is violated. Truthfulness, do when public actors are not truthfully cause outrage. So mores are based in moral value. So it's a type of norm that has morality behind it. Laws are still norms based on right and wrong, and there can be formal norms. Taboos are behaviors that are completely forbidden or wrong in any circumstance and violates results in consequences far more extreme than a more. Often punishable by law and results in severe disgust by members of community. Considers very immoral. Example, incest, cannibalism. Okay? Perspectives on deviance, different association labeling theory and strain theory. Okay, so when a norm is violated, it's called as deviance. So deviance is when you have behavior that goes against the norm of a society. Okay? So now most Americans eat meat, but someone who's vegetarian is deviant in US behavior. Symbolic interactionism is a society is a product of everyday interactions or individuals. So think symbolism is different objects in society that are represented through interactions. Theory of differential association. Okay, what is this theory? States how the deviance is a learned behavior that results from a continued exposure, learns from others or learns from observation of others. So this is saying that if you hang around with the wrong crowd, and the more exposure to violating norms, the more likely you to act on them. Relationships the person forms are very important. If a strong relation, someone is deviant, then the person more likely to learn deviance. As money see, money do. More accept deviant behavior than normal. Example, elite athlete who grows up believing that cheating is wrong, and to be a successful athlete one must train hard, avoid drugs, and be respectable. The athlete now switches teams and on a new, they believe that using steroids, even the athlete has how to be deviant by demonstrating how they take particular drugs. Okay. So basically the differential association theory is saying more exposure to deviant behavior, the more likely you'll develop it. Labeling theory is a behavior that is deviant if people have been if people have judged the behavior and labeled it as deviant. Depends on what is accepted in society. Example stereotypes can be labeled as deviant, not labeled as right or wrong. Possible that in some stereotypes are necessary and professional sports stereotypes can be used as wrong, but in other it can be used as critical. Its perspective on deviance that suggests labeling gets applied to certain groups or individuals. Society reactions to and label for deviance are persons who commit deviant behavior are important. So primary deviance is no big consequences. Reactions to deviant behavior is very mild and does not affect a person's self-esteem. Okay? An individual is able to continue to behave the same way without feeling immoral or wrong. Secondary deviance is more serious consequence carried by severe negative reaction that produces a stigma label and results in more. Example, teammates of athlete label players' behavior as deviant as they exclude him from practice and call him a terrible player. Reaction might be to use steroids more frequently and to try more damaging forms of drugs. Strain theory. If a person is blocked from attaining a cultural accepted goal, they become frustrated and strained and turn to deviance. Individuals in a group are pushed towards a certain goal but may not mean legitimate ways to achieve success. Society values a certain behavior, but the opportunity to be successful is not made available to everyone. Lack of equal opportunity results in illegal means to achieve success. Okay. Aspects of collective behavior: fads, mass hysteria, and riots. So the previous video talked about norms and deviance and how changing norms can occur at individual levels. What happens when a large number of individuals rapidly behave in a way that are not in line with societal norms. Sociology, this is called collective behavior. Collective behavior is not the same as group behavior because of a few reasons. First, collective behavior is a time limit and involves social short interactions, while a group stays together and socialize for long periods. Collectives can be open while groups can be exclusive. Collections have loose norms, while groups have strong, well-defined norms. Collective behavior violates generally violates widely held societal norms and it's timed to be destructive. Collective behavior is often driven by group dynamics such as de-individualization. Certain group dynamics can encourage people to engage in an act they may consider wrong in normal circumstances, which also occurs in collectiveness. Sociologists identify three collective behaviors: fad, mass hysteria, and riots. So fad is a fleeting behavior, something that becomes incredibly popular when quickly, but leaves popularity just as quick. Lasts for a short period of time, but reaches the influence of a large number of people in that time. Not necessarily in line with normal behavior, perceived as cool and interesting. So fads are just like general trends that people do. It's like the cinnamon challenge. So fads is like fad equals trend. That's seen like on TikTok, if that helps you remember. Mass hysteria is a large number of people who experience unmanageable delusion and anxiety at the same time. Reactions spread rapidly and reach more people through rumors and fears. Often takes the form of panic reactions and negative news. Mass hysteria refers to behaviors that occur when a group reacts emotionally or irrationally to receive or perceive threats by panic and spread of information. Mild form of hysteria is a reaction due to a new of severe weather warnings. The result of severe anxiety induces a large number of people, and the fear causes people to become crazed, drive erratically. Mass psychogenic illness or epidemic hysteria is a result of psychology where a large amount of people believe they have the same illness despite lack of disease. Example, after anthrax attack in the U.S., after reports there were over 2,000 false alarms. Individuals reported false alarms because they believed they were exposed, which caused the placebo effect, basically. Riots. They're characterized by large numbers of people who engage in dangerous behaviors, such as vandalism, violence, or other crimes. So riots, think of like riots in prisons. They're very chaotic and cost millions of dollars of damage. So, riot is a violent form of crowd behavior that results from the feelings of injustice or the needs that they're being ignored. Riots typically result in property damage or significant crimes. A mob is a group of individuals who are emotional and violent but target specific individuals. So it's not the same as a riot. Alright, let's go into learning. So learning, the different types of learning. There's non-associative learning, when an organism repeated exposure to one type of stimulus. So non-associative learning is like classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Repeated exposure to a stimulus. Habituation and sensitization. In habituation, person turns out the stimulus. And dishabituation occurs when the stimulus is removed. Sensitization is increase in responsiveness to a repeated stimuli. Social learning is when one event is connected to another, classical and operant conditioning. So, classical conditioning, also known as Pavlovian or responsive conditioning, is learning process in which an innate response is paired to opponent stimuli with a conditioned response. This is achieved by repairing a neutral stimulus with a potent stimulus. So I'm conditioning myself to like it is the same as I'm learning to like it. So the stimulus is anything that stimulates your senses that we talk about in the perception. Stimulus can produce a response. Classically, it does not involve change of behavior like operant conditioning. So a carrot is a unconditioned stimulus because no one had to teach a guinea pig to eat like carrots. The unconditioned stimulus triggers a response called the unconditioned response. This would be like excitement in the guinea pig, or hunger, drooling if it was a dog for like a food. Unconditioned means it's innate and already do it naturally and not learned, while conditioned means it's a learned behavior. So right before the guinea pig gets a carrot, they heard the refrigerator door, which would be a neutral stimulus. and a stimuli you can sense and doesn't produce a reflex that is being tested. In this example, the sound could be a conditioned stimulus. So when they hear the fridge opening, it will promote like excitement or drooling because they associated it with a carrot. So pairing the two stimuli show how you establish classical conditioning. Example, guinea pig was conditioned to respond to a sound of a refrigerator. Refrigerator door is a condition because a neutral stimulus, and elicits a conditioned response, excitement. Excitement was previously a unconditioned response elicited by a carrot. Gotcha. Pavlov is another classical example. Classical conditioning, extinction, spontaneous regulated generalization, and discrimination. So, the last experiment, guinea pigs got excited to a desk door, to a refrigerator door opening because it sounded similar to a refrigerator door. This is termed generalization. So, generalization is the tendency and ability of a stimuli similar to a conditioned stimuli to elicit a conditioned response. So, it allows us to make appropriate responses to similar stimuli. Okay. Guinea pigs don't respond to a dresser door which makes sound different from a refrigerator. It's called discrimination. They learn to make a response from a stimuli from others. Also have adaptive value because you want to respond differently to a stimuli. Example, if you want to respond to loud noises in the same way, you probably won't respond differently to a loud bang of a drum versus a loud bang of a gunshot. That makes sense. If you open a refrigerator door and get a guinea pig a carrot, you get a carrot. Over time, she'll no longer react extinction. When a conditioned stimulus does not elicit a conditioned response anymore. Extinction is loss of like a response of a behavior. It's used to treat certain phobias. If you're afraid of heights, the therapist is exposed to various heights that won't elicit the same response. But suddenly she hears the refrigerator door open and makes the response. Forms like feelings intrigue more than the usual and causes spontaneous recovery. Don't know why it happens, usually infrequently, doesn't persist for long, and lasts less strong. In classical conditioned behaviors, typically in response to one stimuli becomes the response due to another stimuli. Extinctive burst. When an animal no longer receives regular reinforcement, its original behavior will sometimes spike. This is known as extinction burst. While extinction, when implemented consistently over time, the results of the eventual decrease of an undesired behavior. In the short term, the subject might exhibit what is called extinction burst. Extinction bursts will occur only when the extinction procedure has just begun. This is usually consistent with a sudden temporary increase in the response rate, followed by eventual decline and extinction of a behavior targeted by free elimination. Novel behavior and emotion responses or aggressive behavior may also occur. Take, for example, a pigeon has been reinforced to peck electrical button. During straight, every time the pigeon pecked the button, will have received a small amount of bird seed as a reinforcer. So operant conditioning. So when the bird is hungry, it will peck the button to receive food. However, the button turned off, the hungry pigeon will first try pecking, just as it did in the past. When no food is forthcoming, the bird will try and try again. To pure frantic activity, pecking behavior yields no result. The pigeon pecking will decrease in frequency. Got it. Aversive conditioning is usually used to stop particular behaviors. This process involves pairing a habit person wishes to break to, such as smoking break, sweating the bed, unpleasant stimuli such as electrical shock or nausea. If I stop Shaniqua from smoking, I could shock her every time she smokes. The shock is the unconditioned stimulus and the pain is the unconditioned response. Once the smoking becomes associated with the electrical shock, acquisition, shock will experience pain when she smokes, even without the shock. Thus, the smoking will become the conditioned stimulus, and the pain is the conditioned response. Systemic desensitization was developed by Joseph Wolpe. A process that involves teaching the client to replace feelings of anxiety with relaxation. It works great with phobias. If a client has horrible phobia of spiders, the therapist will teach a client relaxation techniques. Slowly, spiders are introduced to Kira. First, maybe just a picture, and then one by a stage, and then one outside the cage. The goal is to Kira to get associated spiders. Alright, let's talk about implosive therapy. Most of the time, systemic descent occurs gradually, but sometimes therapy uses implosive therapy. Implosive therapy is when you get thrown right into a room with 1,000 spiders. But if they face their fear and survive, they'll realize the fear is irrational. Technique often produces a lot of anxiety. Makes sense. If you know that gradual increase of exposure, it mostly promote a more fearful response. Counter conditioning, also called stimulus substitution, is a form of responsive conditioning that involves the conditioning of unwanted behavior response to a stimuli into a wanted behavior response. So counter conditioning is very similar to extinction seen in classical conditioning. It's the process of getting rid of an unwanted response. But in counter conditioning, the unwanted response does not appear. It's replaced by a new wanted response. So the conditioned stimulus is present of unconditioned stimulus. This is also thought as a stimulus substitution. So the weaker stimulus will be replaced by a stronger stimulus. With counter conditioning successful, the process cannot be explained by simply substitution of a stimulus. It's usually explained by the things such as condition inhibition, habituation, or extinction. It's common treatment for aggression, fears, and phobias. The use of counter conditioning is widely used for treatment in humans as well as animals. The most common goal is to decrease or increase the want or desire of the stimulus. One of the most widely used types of counter conditioning is the systemic desensitization. Extinction occurs both in operant and classical conditioning. Phobic responses are acquired through classical conditioning. Through generalization. Let's move into operant conditioning. Operant conditioning has positive and negative reinforcements and punishment. It's associated with Skinner. Operant conditioning is also called instrumental conditioning, focused on the relationship between behavior and their consequences, and those in turn influence the behavior. Classical conditioning has no change in behavior, while operant looks at things that promote a change in behavior or increase in behavior. So there's two types of consequences: reinforcement and punishment. Reinforcements increase the behavior, punishment decreases the behavior. The two types of reinforcement are positive and negative, and the two types of punishment are positive and negative. We'll use an example. Safe driving. A positive reinforcement sometimes is being added to increase tendency of behavior. Example, a gas gift card for safe driving. A negative reinforcement takes something away to increase tendency behavior and will not occur again. So I'm taking a loud buzzing noise away once you put on your seatbelt. Taking away the buzzer when you put on a seatbelt is a negative reinforcer because it takes something away to increase a behavior. A positive punishment means something is added to decrease the tendency to perform a behavior, like giving a speeding ticket to decrease behavior of speeding. Negative punishment is something taken away in effort to decrease tendency to occur again. Example, taking away your license. All these are concepts that shape behavior or influence behavior. Immediacy of feedback is an important factor influencing behavior. There's primary reinforcers, which are innate satisfying desires like food, water, sexual activity. Secondary reinforcers are those learned to be reinforcers, such as pre-neutral stimuli, requiring a pairing or association of a primary reinforcer. So secondary reinforcers using classical conditioning to make a neutral stimuli into a reinforcer of behavior. So, token economy is a system of behaviors modified on a systemic reinforcement of target behavior. Reinforcers are tokens that are exchanged for other reinforcers. You get tokens, you earn prizes. Operant extinction is operant conditioning results for some response by an order no longer being reinforced. For example, you keep getting your dog to sit on command, but you stop giving it a treat. Over time, the dog may not sit anymore if you give it the command. So it's just like extinction in classical conditioning. But without getting the reward, it'll make it stop doing that behavior. Instinctive drift is the phenomenon where established habits or operant techniques that replace the instincts. Didn't mean to highlight that. Let's see if I can erase it real quick. Yeah, there we go. Instinct drifts is the phenomenon where established habits learned through operant techniques essentially are replaced by innate food relation behaviors. So learned is against their instinct behavior. Instinct drift is the tendency of animals to revert back to their instincts even if they're interfered with conditioned response. Concept originated with Skinner's students when they teach the raccoon to put tokens into a piggy bank. Instincts drifted into an instinctive behavior of putting the tokens on the ground and turning them over in their paws, as they often do with food. How is a motivational state defined? By depriving the subject of some desirable for a period of time. Extinction occurs in both operant conditioning and classical conditioning. Operant conditioning shaping. I want to learn to do a headstand. Emphasizes learn. Learning is through successfully reinforcing behaviors that probably target behavior is shaping. So shaping is learning through successfully reinforcing behaviors. What's a target behavior? The final behavior you wish to train. Headstand. Show up to yoga class. Won't necessarily make you learn it. Next, put hands on mat. Downward dog and then forearms on mat. Each is then reinforced until next step. Finally, put legs up the target. So example of shaping. So shaping is just shaping a behavior through different texts to complete a complex task. To teach a bird to perform a complex and spin a circle and press the button, you might reward it at varying steps through the process over time. So for example, you might get a treat every time it turns a little. After a while, you only give it a treat when it makes a full circle. After this, you only give it a treat if it makes a full circle and maybe bends towards the button. Finally, he rewarded the bird not for completing the full task. In this time, it's learned to perform a different part of the task in small intervals. Another example is dogs who can shake hands, roll over on commands. Makes sense. Operant conditioning schedules of reinforcement. So most of our behaviors are on a partial reinforcement schedules. Behaviors is reinforced on some of the time. More resistant to extinction than continuous reinforcement. Behavior is shaped through a process of successful reinforcement and approximation to target behaviors. So partial reinforcement is you only reinforce it sometimes, but other times it doesn't occur. And it's more resistant to extinction because you expect to occur at some later in time. Continuous reinforcement becomes less reinforcing, so there is a need for alternate reinforcement. Continuous reinforcement occurs on a 1-to-1 ratio. This means that each behavior there is a reward. So this is like you're constantly reinforcing the behavior every time they do it. A fixed ratio, acronym ration. Ration equals amount, fixed means consistent. So it's where a carman gets a bonus every 5 cars he sells. Reinforcement only occurs after a fixed number of responses. Contingent on the number of cars sold regardless of how long it takes. Jobs that demand someone to work faster than a fast pace typically pays work on a fixed ratio. Fixed interval interval equals time. So receives pay check every 2 weeks. In this case, time is constant. Sorry, I was dying from sneezing. Pay doesn't change if he sells 1 car or 100 cars. Less incentive to sell cars. Response rate is slower. That makes sense. Why didn't I think of this before? Because in my book, it didn't explain it like that. So fixed ratio is you gain a reward after every 5 cars. Fixed interval, you get the same amount of reward after every 2 weeks. Variable ratio is variation in a specific rate. Root force is delivered after an average number of right responses have occurred, similar to fixed ratio, except number changes for each reward. Just fixed ratio but varies. Example, bonus is paid after selling 5 cards and 3 for the second, 7 for third, 6 and 4. Less than 3 cards can't predict when he will get a bonus. Another example is a slot machine. You don't know when the next pull will be a jackpot. Variable interval. Response is reinforced after a very amount of time and has passed. Regardless of the amount, bonus can come randomly on different days. VR is most effective. Think very rapid response. I will remember that. VR is very rapid response. Fixed interval is the slowest because paycheck, so why does it impact behavior that much? Makes sense, okay. Operant conditions, innate versus learned behavior. Innate behaviors is instincts versus learned behaviors. Innate behaviors performed correctly the first time in response to a stimuli. The innately possessed called an instinct. Simple innate behaviors are reflexes such as squinting or blinking, taxis for bugs flying towards a light, kinesis, rats randomly scurrying in different positions. Complex innate behaviors is fixed action patterns, mating dance, migration, circadian rhythms of sleep. Some learned behaviors are learned behaviors through experience. Habituation is response to alarm decrease over time. Sample curing as phobia for repeated exposure is the fear until. Oh my god, forgot how to read for a second. Experiment. Curing phobia by repeat exposure to a fear until intensity of emotional response decreases. Classical conditioning associating. We talked about this. So one stimulus with another that produces a specific response. Example, freaking out is a conditioned response because of fire alarm. It's the fire alarm plus are paired. The unconditioned response was the fire, which you have a natural response to. Operant conditioning concept of foul behavior increase or decrease likelihood of behavior. Insight learning is solving a problem using past. Insight learning is following behaviors that you learned in your past. So it's like deductive reasoning. Latent learning is learning behaviors that's not expressed until required. Innate learning is fixed action patterns that are hardwired. Operant conditioning and escape and avoidance learning. Escape and avoidance learning are two types of aversive control where they're trying to get away from a response. Situation where behavior is motivated by a threat and something unpleasant, and they try to remove it from doing that desired. So escape is an unpleasant stimuli once it's occurred. Escape a unpleasant one once it occurred. The response is conditioned of escaping. So escape behavior would be like a dog getting shocked on its feet and want to jump to the other side of the fence. Typical, the response would not occur. Fire an ability and you have to find a way out. Escape condition occurs when the animal learns to perform an operant determine a ongoing get me out of here to shut this off reaction. So the dog jumping over the shock floor to the non-shock floor. Avoidance signals given before aversive behavior. So if a dog hears a sound before they turn on the shock floor, they're already going to jump over before they even turn on the shock floor because they're trying to avoid that behavior. So it makes sense. Side note, drive reduction is a negative reinforcer. Incentive is a positive. We already talked about the boba doll with Albert Bandura. We talked about long-term potentiation and synaptic plasticity earlier. Non-associative learning. We already talked about this, but let's look about it more. Example, you're sitting in bed and you hear a thunderclap. Thunderclap, which results in you jumping. Interesting, I never heard it being called a thunderclap. But okay. Happen. Three options. Habitually, sensitization, or the same response. So sensitization and habituation are two forms of non-associative learning. Learning where no punishment or reward is occurring increases, decreases over response. You're simply noticing how a response changes in relationship to the same stimuli over time. Response to a series of stimuli with thunderclaps, you have three options. Same response, you jump equally as high. With the stimulus, you become habituated. The same stimuli responds to a decrease in response. Same stimuli results in a decreased response. Sensitized, the same stimuli, there is an increased response. Opposite of habituation is sensitization. Sensitization is the non-associative learning process in which repeated administration of stimuli results in a progressive amplification of response. Sensitization also is characterized by the enhancement of response to a whole class of stimuli. So this can promote generalization. Okay. And this is just classical conditioning, Pavlov, unconditioned stimuli with unconditioned response, a neutral stimulus with no response. You prepare that neutral stimuli with an unconditioned response to approach a conditioned stimulus. It creates a net conditioned stimulus, which can get paired with a conditioned response. Biological constraints on learning. Your thought classical conditioning operating were all types of learning that were applied across the board, but there are some biological limitations. Animals were prepared to learn some kinds of association with different degrees of difficulty. They discovered it's easy to learn associations that are part of their natural world, but not easy to learn associations that were not. So taste aversion. You eat something because you like it, but then stop eating because you become sick. Aversions are strong and they don't make sense. You're eating cilantro and really like it, but get sick from it, then start hating cilantro. Also could be chicken you were eating actually caused the sickness, but you started hating cilantro anyway. Body connects the facts that the sickness is a result of food, not other attributes. Environment that when you ate. More likely to get sick because of food, so associated and learned quickly. How do we study this in the lab? Rats were deprived of water, then rats were given sweet water afterwards. Each time they got water, a light flashed and a sound beeped. In the first group, the substance that made them ill is added to the sugar water. In another group, nothing is added to the sugar water, but get electrical shock instead. After some time this occurred, the same rats are made sick in the first group are put in two scenarios. Sweet water plus no light, and then tap water plus beep plus light. The same rats were shocked in the second group and are put in the two scenarios. Sweet water plus no rep equals beep and tap water. So, this shows that it's conditioning a response to the water causing them to be sick when the shock actually, or the beep, caused them to get sick. So, the top left box, if you get physical sick, you probably ate something bad. You avoid that food again, the sweet water. Bottom left box, you don't pair the beep plus light with getting sick, only the sweet water. In this case, the water is normal and so no aversion to it. Top right box, getting shocked was due to the environment that is now removed, so the sweet water is not what caused the harm. You show no aversion to the sweet water. Biomarker, you show aversion because the environment is still present to cause harm. You show aversion even to tap water. Studies show that non-associated or equal and animals don't make association in all circumstances. If you get physically sick, you probably ate something. Phobias are another example of biological influence on learning, which is basically generalization that we talked about earlier. So, let's talk about theories of attitude and behavior change. We already talked about the three components of attitude: affective, cognitive, and behavioral. Then that was above. We talked about how it influences our behavior based on the certain situation that we're in. And we talked about the behavior influence attitude. And that was like the prison experiment that we talked about, or the shocking experiment. So, persuasion, attitude change, and elaboration likelihood model. So persuasion is the method for attitude and behavior change. That makes sense because you're trying to persuade someone to do something for you. So it's likely to change their behavior. Elaborative likelihood model explains how attitudes are formed and how likely they are to change. Target characteristics are most important in this model, but also play a factor. Message and source characteristics as well. Determines when people will be influenced by content of speech or more superficial features. So, there's three main characteristics that impact on how we persuade for or against a message, okay? There's message characteristics, which is talking about the message itself, clarity, was it logical, how well thought the message was. Can include, does the speaker use good grasp of grammar, vocab, length of talk. That could persuade us, those different components. We also have source characteristics, which is the environment around the message and the speaker background. What is their level of expertise? Do they seem knowledgeable, trustworthy? Is the information credible or not? Where does the information come from? And then we have target characteristics. Characteristics of listeners such as mood, self-esteem, alertness, intelligence, how we receive a message. So, according to the elaborative likelihood model, we want to evaluate information along two different pathways: central and peripheral pathways. The route is chosen, information is passed through these different stages. I need to learn these stages because I always see them and I have no idea what they're talking about. So, stage 1 is central processing due to target characteristics. Before we consider information or are persuaded by it, this information is first filtered by our interest, motivation, importance. So, central processing, if the listener is interested and motivation and importance are high, people will choose this route. Okay? And peripheral processing, if the listener's instant motivated and importance are low, we process through a peripheral route, chosen when the listener doesn't care about a topic. We filter information based on what we process it. So we'll use the central route if we care about the topic. So like central process for me would be if we care about a topic about video games, I would process it using central processing. If there's a topic more on philosophy that I don't really care that much about, it would be using peripheral. So I'll be using peripheral processing when I'm reading that Cars passage, which I should be using central. Stage 2, processing stage by message and source. Central processing focuses on the deep processing of the information. Peripheral processing focuses on the superficial characteristics. Shell processing of information such as the attractiveness of the speaker, their PowerPoint attractiveness, or even how many points the speaker made. How many times speakers gets audience to laugh. So central processing wants to learn the definition, while peripheral wants to just like get the top layer of details. Because they're not really interested into it, so like they just want to hear the main points. And then stage 3 is change in attitude. Central processing can create a lasting attitude change, while peripheral creates a temporary. Like, that was interesting, you could feel like, but it won't change your whole experience over philosophy. Reciprocal determination. I just believe before I read this, you give the reciprocal behavior based on the environment. So, reciprocal determination is the interaction between a person's behaviors, personal factors, and environment that are all determined by one another. Okay? The social cognitive theory views behavior as being influenced by people, traits, cognition, and their social context, talking about interactions between individuals and situations. Cognition and environment behavior. The order can change as well. Example, Meg is interested in soccer. Cognition. Joins a soccer team as the environment and spends time with the soccer player's behavior. I'm sorry, I just had a mental break. So, the social cognitive theory views behaviors are influenced by people around us and the context that they're in. They talk about interactions between individuals and situations they're in. Okay. So, it's basically social cognitive theories explains behaviors are impacted by the people around them and the environment and the social construct. This theory was developed by Bandera with probably the Bobo experiment, which learning is observational. Personal control of locus of control, learned helplessness, and tyranny of choice. I remember this from my Kaplan book. So a external control is it's by chance and out of our hands. Internal is it's based on our own ability to control our fate. Learned helplessness is the ability to feel like they're not able to improve their ability to learn. That is my overview. So let's go see what this document says. Perceived behavior control. First to a person's ability to carry out intentions, perform a certain behavior. Makes sense. So if they have perceived behavior, they can have ability to change their intention to perform a behavior. And the locus of control is internal or external. Internal, as I said, was controls fate of their own destiny. External is luck or other outside forces, God or something willed it. Therapy can be used to encourage a patient to attribute problems or internal controllable factors. These internal achievements more in school and work, cope better with stress and lower depression. Externally do not as well in higher rates of depression. Learned helplessness is the idea that we can't change our behavior. When tone is sound and dog receives a lot of shocks but could not press button to stop the shock. Group 2 had no way to turn off the shocks. Dogs placed in a new environment in two sides separated by a low partition in the middle. Given a light shock, both dogs in Group 1 learned to escape. Dogs 2 in Group 2 didn't try to escape the shock. Therefore, uncontrolled bad events can lead to a perceived lack of control. So this is like anxiety disorders or depression. Increases people's control over very small things, like a 2-year-old can increase the health and well-being of people in a nursing home. So having some control of life can increase the way of living. So, what is the tyranny of choice? Tyranny of choice is when there's too many choices that has a negative impact on cognition and behavior. So let's think you go to a video game store with an idea about a game that you want to buy, and you're just there and your mom wants to let you pick out a game. You can't pick because there's too many choices, so this impacts you on your decision making. And you tend to be less likely to pick something to make you happy. Our result is information overload and can lead people to decision paralysis or increased regret with tyranny of choice. Alright, let's move into self-control. Self-control is the ability to control our impulse and delayed gratification. This is how we behave. Humans have natural desires, motivations started with pleasure, release of displeasure, aren't necessarily bad, such as desire to drink water to live. When they become temptations, desire, conflict, values, or temptations are when desire conflicts with values of long-term goals. Want to eat a candy bar, but having a long-term effect of losing weight. Or watching a series on Netflix versus graduating with your PhD. The most famous experiment of self-control is common for the marshmallow test. Okay. Interesting. Kids are previously given a marshmallow and could eat it whenever, but if they waited 15, they could get another marshmallow, total of 2. They have to forego immediate gratification, wait for a better result. Some ate it right away, but other kids licked it. Those who were able to wait and tend to have better life outcomes when followed 10 years later. So it shows better self-control had improved outcomes later in life. So self-control improves management in all areas of life. As I was saying, ego depletion is the idea of self-control as a limited resource. See, a lot of it can get used up, and less of it's used in the future will be affected later unrelated tasks. Requiring self-control. This is true because self-control relies on a lot of energy and focus. So self-control is like someone with an addiction to playing video games. They want to break it. They want to use all their energy to prevent them from playing video games. So like they'll go outside and exercise instead of playing video games. Demonstrated by an experiment that those who resist eating cookies end up giving up sooner, or another unrelated task rather requires self-control than those who didn't resist. Muscle is used as a metaphor for self-control. It can be strengthened with practice, but also be fatigued and depleted overuse. Working on tasks that requires a lot of self-control, make sure you get a lot of sleep and rest afterwards. It's very energy depleting. Got it. Training self-control in one area can improve in other areas. Exercise if you don't want to. Geez, this is a short page. Okay. How to improve self-control. Change environment. Make objects of your temptation harder to get while making better and healthy option choices. Example, move unhealthy objects to make it more difficult to reach on a shelf than healthy snacks. Operate conditioning brute force good behaviors with rewards, positive and negative rewards, or punishments. Example, watch an episode of Netflix for each segment of desertion completed. So, example is operate conditioning is to complete behavior of self-control. So you watch a video after every few hours of studying for the MCAT as a reward. Or prevent a beeping on your computer as you type in MS Word. It's a negative reinforcer. Ah, that's interesting. Punishment, turn off internet to decrease behavior of watching Netflix. Classic conditioning is eating healthy snacks every time you crave chocolate, and over time you might just start craving healthy snacks. That's actually a good idea. I never thought of that. So when you crave chocolate, just eat healthy snacks. Interesting. The more you know. Deprivation. Removing an object of temptation completely is problematic. It can make you want it more and lead to ego depletion. That's probably why those with strict diets always fail due to temptation. Makes sense. Alright, now we're going to get fully in sociology about individuals and society. So, our self-identity. Our self-concept, aka our self-identity, is how someone thinks, perceives themselves. So, self-concept is how we view ourselves and how we're aware of our abilities. It's derived from self-esteem and self-efficiency. Development of self-concept has two parts: existential self and categorical self. Okay? Existent self is most part of our self-concept, the sense of being separate and distinct from others. Awareness that the self is constant and consistent throughout life. If someone says they're tired, this isn't them all the time. It's not the self-concept because self-concept is consistent. Childhood as a young child, as young as 2 or 3, realize they exist as distinct entities due to the relationship children as within the world. Someone sighs, someone smiles back. The relationship with objects and they are separate and distinct from that. Categorical self comes once baby realizes they're separate because they're aware that they're separate and distinct individuals that exist in the world. Each of the objects have properties. Age and gender are first categories first babies learn. Then skills and skies. Then as we go older, we compare ourselves with traits, comparison, careers. Carl Rogers, that we talked about in the humanistic theory, believes self-concept has three different components: the self-image, self-esteem, and ideal self. Self-image is what we believe we are, the view that we have of ourselves. Self-esteem, self-worth is how much value we place on ourselves. And the ideal self is what we wish and aspire to be. What's incongruity? Can you highlight this twice? You can highlight it twice. Incongruity is the idea that self and real self are similar and the response is a positive self-concept. So that's just self-concept incongruency. When we use the social identity theory to develop our self-concept, it has two different parts: personal identity and social identity. I have learned this. I had taken a social identity class at my college. So, our personal identity is things unique to each person, like personality traits. So, social identity involves a group you belong to in our community. Our mental process is involved in how we categorize ourselves, / use social identity theory. Process involved 3 steps. This process is used to categorize ourselves, others, and look at relationships, return our personal and social identities. Step 1 of the social identity theory. All humans categorize ourselves and others without realizing it. It's part of our human nature. Putting things into categories is just part of learning. Categorize to groups like race, job, etc. Assign categories to others, which makes prejudgmentals. Next is identification. We adopt identities of a group that we see that we belong to and behave and acting like a category that belongs to that group. Example, acting and being like a student if we identify as a student. Role starts to feel like normal. Emotional significance to identification. Our self-esteem starts to become bound within this group identification sense of belonging. Step 3 is social comparison. How we compare ourselves with other groups. We do this to maintain our self-esteem. Critically understand our prejudice, because once 2 groups develop as rivals, we start to compete in other against each other for self-esteem. Self-esteem, self-efficient, locus of control. We talked about locus of control already, internal and external. But self-esteem is respect regards for oneself. Self-worth versus self-esteem. Self-worth versus self-esteem. Greater than all those things, it's a deeper knowing that I am valued and I am lovable, necessary to this life, incomparable worth. It's possible to feel high esteem, or in other words, to think I'm good at something yet still not feel convinced. Self-esteem doesn't last or work without self-worth. Self-efficiency is the belief in one's ability to succeed in a situation, organize and execute the source action in a particular. I learned that in health psychology, interesting enough. It's the ability that they can be successful in a situation. We talked about this with dealing stress though. Well, people have identity goals that they want to accomplish, things that they want to achieve. Most people realize that they are putting places in action. Self-efficiency plays a role in how individuals' goals, challenges are approached. 2 types of self-efficiency are strong and weak. Okay? People with strong self-efficiency recover quickly from setbacks. That's what we're talking about in stress. Strong senses of commitment to activities, enjoyment, challenges. Acronym RISE. Recover interest, strong sense of commitment. Enjoys challenging tests. People with a weak self-efficiency focus on personal failures and their outcomes. Avoid challenges, lose, and lack of ability to handle difficult fall. Low self-esteem, but have high self-efficiency in doing of their abilities. Competent tasks with clear guidance, and lose confidence when there are no clear rules. Locus of control. We already talked about this, but sure. People perceive they have control over events in their lives. Internal is people believe that these are influenced by their own traits and personalities, and that they had to control over their fates. External is attributes events to environmental events / causes, luck, God, etc. The teacher was lenient on the test and they were lucky. Overall theory of development. The theories that change occur in a lifespan, and each stage builds up of another. Develops capacity through stages. We pass stages in order. Freud proposed in the psychosexual theory of development. Believed early childhood was the most important age and period in which personality develops. Most of the personality developed by the age of 5. Early experience play a large role in personality development. This development influences behavior later in life. There's 5 stages. If completed successfully, result with no fixation. We talked about that with Freud earlier. Erickson's, we have conflicts that we talked about earlier, like intimacy versus isolation, or what is the older one called? That guilt versus something. But we did talk about them earlier. I do need to review this one though. We'll review the psychosocial development model. Alright. This has social cognitive development. Believe children learn actively through hands-on processes. I remember talking about this earlier. How children develop based on their interactions with the environment. And then Kohlberg's is the precognitive, cognitive, and formal cognitive abilities of right and wrong. General Freud and Erickson were interested in how personality develops, and Pascal and Kohlberg interested in how cognitive develops. So, Freud's psychosexual development. Let's talk about it again. Psychological development in children develop through stages and constant attention and pleasure. The buildup of tension can cause a lot of conflict. Fixation was due to conception of libido and natural energy as source that fuels the mind. First 5 years are like a crucial development of personality. And the different stages: oral, anal, phallic, latent, genital. Depends on what stage we are that we get fixated to form our environment. For the oral stage, focus on the mouth. The oral stage is libido sense of interaction centered around the baby's mouth. Vital for suckling, eating. Infant derives pleasure via oral stimulation. Infant completes dependent on parents and caretaking. Anal develops a sense of trust and comfort. Anal stage is focusing on potty training. And if they get fixated, they will be too much order and messy. The phallic stage is where they suppress. No. This is where they develop feelings for the other parent. That they want to have the same feelings that their same-sex parent has for the other. Latent period is no focus on the libido, and it's basically dormant until puberty hits. Genital stage is back on libido because individual sexual interest again. Now focus on needs of others. No adult fixation. Person mentally healthy. Goal: establish balance between various life areas. So here's just a demonstration of the whole definition of Freud's 5 stages of development. Oral, anal, phallic, latent, genital. 0 to 1 is oral, 1 to 3, 3 to 6, latent, 6 to 12, 12 and plus. Mouth, anus, genital, no, genital. Development is feeding, toilet training, sexual behavior, social skills, sexual maturity. So fixation, smoking or overbiting nails, ordinance, messiness, homosexuality, exhibition. Seems non-mental healthness. Interesting. Alright, Freud, you crazy motherfucker. You say so. Erickson's psychosocial development. Note the acronyms are for psychophiles are a stretch. Okay? Psychophiles is a stretch for psychosocial development. Great. Greatly influenced by Freud, but his theory is based on culture and society. Another key difference between his and Freud is he suggested plenty of room for growth throughout one's life. Assuming a crisis can occur at each stage of development, so that's why there's 8 stages. Before we talked about these. But if not, oh well, we can get through them. Acronym: 1 is bun, 2 is shoe, 3 is tree, 4 is dinosaur, 5 is skydive, 6 is sticks, 7 is heaven, 8 is plate. Huh? Okay. So stage 1 is 0, 1 is crisis, is trust versus mistrust. Acronym: bust is rusted. Infant's physical and emotion needs are not met. Adult, he may mistrust everyone. Virtue is hope. Failing to acquire virtue can lead to suspicion and fear, mistrust. Stage 2 is autonomy versus shame and doubt. Acronym: shoe-shaped car driven by doubtful shame. That's dumb. Around 18 months to 3 years old, children develop independence and walk away from mother when what they eat. Critical that parents allow children to do that. And stage 3, 3 to 6, initiative versus guilt. Tree with an N in it and a quilt around it. What are these acronyms, man? Children feel more secure in their ability to lead others in play. So ask questions. First, they respond to a sense of purpose, and what do they do in choice decisions they make. Negative outcome: if they tendency to ask questions is control, develop guilt. If they're annoying other people and act more as a fowler. Stage 4 is age 6 to 12, where teachers take an important role in a child's life. Develop industry versus inferiority. Dinosaur with dust on him feels inferior. Huh? I don't think I'm going to use these acronyms because they feel stupid to me. How is dinosaur? Okay. Virtue. Children will gain significance and great self-esteem and try to win approval from others. Confidence will feel industrial. Negative outcomes: but if initiative restricted, the child feels inferior. Some failure is necessary, so child has modest. Stage 12 to 20, adolescent transition, identity versus role confusion. Whereas, I'm not going to look at that acronym. In this stage, children have learned roles you need to occupy as adults, so may re-examine identity to figure out who they are. Body image plays a big role. Virtue is fidelity, seeing oneself as unique. Failure, role confusion. They don't know what to be when they grow up. Stage 6 is intimacy versus isolation. Sticks being intimate and one being isolated. I don't understand, but okay. Age 20 to 40, trying to find love in relations. I'm just not gonna look at these acronyms, man. They're so dumb. Virtue completed lead to comfortable relationships, love. Negative outcomes avoid intimacy. 40 to 65 is 70 years old. Stage 7 is 40 to 65. Establish career, settle down, makes families to the center of their lives. This is being part of a bigger picture. Generality versus stagnant. Generator powering heaven. A stagnant powering the generator from the nation's heaven. I'm in shock with these acronyms right now. I agree with them saying that these are far-fetched. Positive virtue, adults feel like giving them back through raising. Children, adults feel like they give back through raising children, working, so they develop a sense of care for others. Negative outcome, they feel stagnant and unproductive. Stage 8, 65 and plus, show unproductivity, crisis, integrity versus despair. In which stage where people contemplate on lives, reminisce on their life experience. Virtue is wisdom. Look back on life with sense of closure, completeness, and acceptance during without fear. Feel unproductive leading despair and dissatisfaction upon death. Each state involves culture and society. No bueno. Did not like this one. How they portrayed that in this document, but okay. Let's talk about Visconsi's social cultural development. Study the role of interaction in development of cognition. I believe we talked about them earlier. Focuses on social interactions between children growing and interactions with those around them. Development of cognitive, higher order learning. Passed away early, so much of his theory was left unfinished. Said babies have four elemental mental functions: attention, sensation, perception, and memory. Acronym: elemental babies have cramps. That is dumb. Okay. These elemental mental functions develop a more sophisticated mental process, higher mental functions. Develop skillful tutors and model. Tutor equals a model and children tries to understand. Higher mental functions, independent learning and thinking. Example, solving a puzzle as a kid. You have a hard time as a child, but a parent gives tips and strategies to solve the puzzle. Higher mental functions cultivated by tutoring for who is modeled our behavior. So Viscott says that we learn through our behavior and other models around us. Scaffolding learning is basically this idea. Requires a cooperative and collaborative from more knowledgeable others. Interaction with a learner and more knowledgeable other promotes independence. Zone of proximal development part where most sensitive instruction should be given. Example between ability of not being able to do something and being able to do something. CPT is linked between the zone of proximal development. Allows learners to use their skills as they already have expanded learning things they can't do. Example, puzzle exam. Not being able to solve a puzzle because able to solve puzzle. Not able to solve a puzzle to being able to solve a puzzle. The guidance in this zone allows for the transition from the set of skills you already have to a more expanded skill set. Language, the main means by which adults transmit to their children a powerful tool of intelligent adaptation. It can be private and internal speech when people speak out loud to themselves. Happen most in children. Way for children to plan activity, strategy, and aid in development. Language is the accelerator of thinking and understanding. These children who engage in a lot of private speech are more socially competent. Language developments from social interactions and communication purposes. And these lead to thought, which thinks to others. Okay. Just gotta see social culture development is social interactions, cognition. Elementary MFs. Motherfuckers. Attention, senses, perception, and memory. Higher motherfuckers have independence for their own cognition. It's more formal, but formative. I'm gonna call it a motherfucker now. MKO equals more knowledgeable other. With the individual increases learning. Alright, Kohlberg's moral development. I know Kohlberg has extreme development theory that has 3 stages. More theories of development different from previously, but based on cognitive development, similar to Viscott's. It's how people develop their morals and moral reasoning to change as people do. Also looks at children. He told stories that children gagged at their response. Most famous story was the Heinz dilemma. His wife was dying from the cancer and drug was discovered made by a local chemist that could save her. Chemist charged 10 times the price and took to make the drug, and more that Heinz could afford. After asking family, he only had half the money. Explained that the chemist is dying. His wife is dying, asked if he could have the drug for cheaper. The chemist at a later date. The chemist refused. Heinz, desperate to save his wife, then broke into the chemist's office and stole the drug. Asked children if Heinz didn't love his. Asked questions like, what if Heinz didn't love his wife? If his person dying was a stranger, should he have stolen it? And shouldn't police arrest chemists for murder if woman died? For now, listening, he came up with 3 moral stages. He split into 2 of total 6 stages. 3 levels of moral reasoning, each had 2 subparts. PCP. Pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. Pre-conventional, think preachers smacking obedience with a fish. Okay? Preacher smacking obedience with a fish. So obedience versus punishment. Reasoning is based on physical consequence acting, so obeying the rules mean to avoid punishment. Children. Individuals exchange or self-interest recognize just not one view authority. Okay, conventional convict named norm. Conventional convict named norm. So this looks at society norms and law and order. So society norms, good boy, good girl, authority is internalized but not questioned. Reasonings based on group person belongings. Law and order is law abidance, maintains social structure. Child is aware of wider rules in society and obeying laws to follow rules. And then the debated one is post-conventional that some people may never reach. Postman delivers a contract in universal today. Higher moral reasonings. Social contract individual becomes aware that even though rules exist, there are times where laws work against the interests of particular people. Yes. And then universal ethic group is looking at the universal ethics of all humans and a moral guideline. And principles apply to everyone. People are uphold and believe in this. Prepare to act towards these even if they obey consequence and disapprove imprisonment. So this is the 3 levels that they were talking about. Level 1, supreme mortality, punishment, obedience, and then the hedonistic orientation, doing what's right. Level 2 is conventional morality, law and order, and social norms. Level 3 is post-conventional, social contract, and then universal. Social influence are a branch of social psychology. We are going to stop on page 26 when I take my first break. Okay. How imitation roles, reference groups, and culture are all parts of a social influence. Look at individual thought, action, feelings that are influenced by social groups. Okay. Imitation. The type of individual social influence one is the basis form of social behavior, beginning with understanding the difference between others and ourselves. Whoever Andrew Meltzow's positive study that question theory that understanding between self and other happens soon after birth. In his experiment, he said babies are born with a built-in capacity to imitate others. In his experiment, a baby 12 to 21-year-old baby copy sticking tongue out. Baby imitates experimenter. Is it a true imitation or something else? Picture you opening mouth. Baby should also open mouth. And close head to ensure it wasn't a reflex or condition either. And baby had pacified in mouth. An experiment stuck out his tongue. Baby imitated then after the pad was taken out. Condition experiments, facial experiments have to be blank during the experiment. It's just that we're born with capacity to imitate others. Built-in social mechanism which is critical for our species to learn through others. So this is talking about like that opera conditioning through mirror neurons, which fire another, which when one fires, another fires, which exerts the same action performed by other. Found in an area of the motor and premotor cortex and somatic cortex, can be helped understand imitation. Roles are what we define what we do and who we are. There are social norms, standards of behaviors and social group used to guide our behaviors. Norms provide order to society, and we use them to conform expectations of others. Respond to their approval and what we play as our roles to get, and when we get disapproval. Expects people to behave in ways that fit the role and have them fit the role even more than when roles are stereotyped. So, looking back at the standard prison experiment, being in a prison environment caused guards to become more authoritative, sadistic, and powerful compared to prisoners. Prisoners felt powerless to the guards. They were stuck up to the guards, their expectation of the prisoners for approval for the guards. I always remember reference good is you're always comparing yourself to someone else. That refers to evaluating themselves. They're comparing them to someone else's behaviors. Constantly looking for external groups that align with our beliefs. These groups influence our social decisions, our beliefs, attitudes, behavior. Reference groups are groups that people refer to when they're evaluating their own group behaviors. Group that an individual compares themselves is for self-evaluation. First, a social science student reference group when deciding what political party to vote for an election, or referring to a feminist reference group when deciding whether to change the name after marriage if you're female. Any person or group in formation of general specific values of influence our social decisions. Bring subconscious beliefs of group everywhere, and you wish to satisfy the expectations of others. These reference groups set some levels of aspiration. Culture and socialization. Important contributions of society in our personal development emphasizes interaction between the people and culture in which we live. Everyone around us influences our social identity development in our large scale, the country in which we live, communities, language, and attitudes we belong to. So, I just blacked out reading that. Sorry, guys. Let's read it again. Culture and socialization. Important contribution of society to our personal development emphasizes interactions between the people and culture in which we live. Everyone around us influences our social identity development on a large scale that the country in which we live in. So it's basically looking at how culture and socialization depends on our interactions that we have with the people around us. George Hardin Mead is the I in me. Charles Cooley and George Hardin Mead both thought others could play a significant role in how we view ourselves. How are they different? How they view this would happen. Cooley thought everyone a person interacts with in a lifetime influences their identity. He thought that this was more restricted. Only certain people can have influence on a person's identity. Sure, Cooley has a broad definition than Mead. Mead developed the idea of social behavioralism. The mind itself emerged through the process of communicating with others. It's the beginning of symbolic interactionism. Infants and children are not influenced by others in any way, merely imitate others and seek themselves as being focused in their own world and don't care what others think of them. Lacks the ability to take perception of another person, related to Pickett's concept of egocentrism. As we grow up, our belief on how others perceive us is more important. This happens in 3 stages: preparatory, play stage, and game stage. This occurs over time as a child grows. The preparatory stage interacts through imitation, plays with pots and pans when parents are cooking. As they grow older, focus on more on communication, others for simple imitation. The play stage is more aware of social relationships reflected. Let me highlight these because they're iffy. More aware of social relationships reflected in children's tendency to pretend play, as others like firefighters mentally assume perspective of others and acting based on their received point of view, found in role taking. Mentally takes perspective of another person acting what's perceived. The game stage, it starts to understand attitude, beliefs, behaviors in a generalized other, society as a whole. With this comes, oh my god, come on, stay focused. You have, let's leave, 10 minutes left. With this comes whole new understandings of society. Children start to realize that people perform in ways not only on what they personally believe, but what is in the way society more broadly expects of them. They understand that people can take on multiple roles. They also realize other opinions about them and those perceptions others have are based on how they act and what they say. They begin to influence by these perceptions or concerned by the reaction of others of what they do, but don't care about reactions of everyone, only significant others. I believe this is the last stage that leads to the development of the I and me. So, me, when we learn through interactions with others, how individually the generalized other perceive the social self and learn through interactions with others. Way to remember, the me is a conforming, socialized person who tries not to do any dick moves. Example, me thinks about people go from high school to college in the US. I is the response of the individual to me. The I is the spontaneous and autonomous part of our unified self. Oh, that hurt me. These are complex theories I'm hearing for the first time. Fuck. So, let's review this looking at this slide. The preparatory stage is we're imitating others through their actions that we observe. The play stage is we pretend play with other ideas, with role taking. The game stage is where generalize others, multiple roles, and significant others. The me is our social self. So, SME. SSMS. Our social self is our me because it makes the word mess. And it's always a mess to keep yourself social. I is response to our social. Okay. Try school looking glass self. This is where I always get confused on in these questions as well. So this is also essential. So socialization describes the process by which people learn the attitudes, behaviors, and values expected by their culture. Okay. Socialization learns occurs through observation and interaction of people who are surrounded by those too close to us and everyone else. Everyone has something to teach us in how we should act in our community. Socialization looks at our self-image and self-concept. Charles Kuhl used the term looking glass self to describe this process. The idea that a person's sense of self does from interpersonal interactions with others. All to happen in 3 steps. How do I appear to others? What must others think of me? Here's how we think about ourselves. Critical aspect of this theory is Cooley believes we are not actually being influenced by opinions of others, but what we imagine the opinions of. Alright. Why did that? Let's try that again. Critical aspects could believe that we're not actually What the fuck's going on? Cooley believed we are not actually being influenced by the opinion of others, but we imagine the opinions of others to be. Example, say we have a teacher grading papers harshly and doing it because they think the student has a lot of potential. But student gets paper back and thinks the teacher did so because student is not very intelligent and came to the conclusion that they're not very good at literature analysis. Might result in student putting less effort into the class. Student is acting on incorrect perceptions on what the teacher believes. Since attitude influences behavior, so you can put less effort into the class instead of more. Could also be influenced before future interactions. Student might talk to a teacher and the student was able to revise their incorrect perceptions and develop a different self-perspective. A good example of the looking glass self is a person trying on clothes before going out with friends. Some people may not think about how others will think about their children, but others can spend quite a lot of time considering what they're going to wear. While they're deciding, the dialogue takes place inside their mind, usually a dialogue about their self. This portion is their identity called the I. That person internalizes the understanding of their friends and society. In a current mature socialization, one individual quite accurately predicts how others may think about him or herself. Such an individual has incorporated the social into the self. The looking glass suggests that the self-concept is influenced by how we are perceived by others. Based on the looking glass self, a person who acquires a stigmatized illness is likely to internalize the stigma directly against him or herself. Symbolic interaction paradigm in sociology. The looking glass of self suggests that the self-concept is more than a product of self-reflection. Instead, the way in which people see themselves is based on how they believe others perceive them during social interactions. Important detail there. The looking glass self is the notion that we can construct our identities on our way, our interpersonal actions, and the perception of others. This is not something that one can necessarily avoid. It's simply one sociological construct from understanding how we build our sense of self. So, perception, prejudice, and bias. That will be where we continue next. But it's break time. Because that is a lot. But it's fine. We'll be